Cinemaster fans, hope you're ready for some movie magic. Let's dive right in. The movie begins in the streets of Paris when a man emerges from a manhole in the middle of the night and starts looking for a taxi. He runs toward an empty one, unaware that his movement catches the attention of something else beneath the ground. Even the taxi driver tries to help him when he stumbles in the middle of the road, but he backs off when he sees something dragging the man underground. After this incident, we meet the Americans, Andy, Brad, and Chris, who are on a trip through Europe. These three love adventure and collect points for every crazy challenge they complete. When a French woman passes by them, Chris dares Andy to get her phone number, but Andy responds, saying that she's not his type. The other two burst out laughing, teasing him for never making a move on any girl so far. Andy, trying to change the subject, tells them he'll show them a bold challenge that will make them envious. In Paris, they head straight to the top of the Eiffel Tower. Andy starts doing some calculations in a small notebook, then pulls out a long rope from his bag. His friends start to worry, and Brad even apologizes for teasing him on the train, telling him he doesn't need to prove anything to them. Suddenly, they hear someone approaching the restricted area, so they quickly hide. It turns out to be a young, beautiful woman placing papers from a folder on her chest, tears streaming down her face, and preparing to jump. Andy steps out from his hiding spot to try to change her mind, but the young woman continues on her way, and he jumps after her, relying on the rope he had tied around his leg. His friends rush to grab the other end of the rope as he grabs the woman's leg. In the end, all he gets out of the ordeal is her shoe, but they get close enough to the ground that she isn't harmed. Meanwhile, Andy's head hits a metal beam on the way up, and he wakes up the next day in the hospital. Brad kept the mysterious woman's shoe, and Andy asks his friends to help him find the papers and discover who she is. This leads to several misunderstandings with the French, who get annoyed by the tourists' behavior, except for one woman who mistakes them for beggars and tosses them a coin. In the hospital, Andy can't believe his eyes when he sees the woman passing through the corridor wearing a nurse's uniform. He runs after her and even manages to make her smile when he says he wants to return her shoe. But at that very moment, a clueless doctor opens a door suddenly, hitting the already injured young man and knocking him down again, while the woman escapes once more. The doctor also asks about her, saying she stole his heart. Later, his friends bring him good news. They found the papers and discovered the woman's name is Seraphine Pigot. As soon as Andy recovers and gathers his courage, he goes to her house and rings the bell. She's still wearing her nurse costume when she opens the door, and he notices her fingers are stained with blood. She takes the shoe from him, thanks him quickly, slams the door in his face, and tells him they shouldn't linger there. Chris and Brad are already walking away, but Andy fears she might try to harm herself again, so he starts ringing the bell like a madman. Seraphine opens the door and begs him to leave, but agrees to meet him the next day. At the agreed time, she arrives in a hurry, while the guys are still fixing their appearance and giving each other last-minute advice. The two then go to a cafe, and everything starts going wrong because Andy is incredibly awkward. Seraphine suspects he expects too much from this meeting, and when she finally gets fed up with him, he opens up honestly, admitting he's so nervous because he's very attracted to her. He also says he's worried about her safety and can't stop thinking about her sad eyes from that night. These words seem to move her, and she admits she was deeply affected by his bravery, jumping to save her without a second thought. But then she speaks in a mysterious tone, saying no one can truly help her. At that moment, another customer in the cafe starts provoking Andy, even intimidating his friends, who are hiding at another table. Seraphine tells the bully to stop, but he headbutts Andy, forcing her to return the favor and save him from a beating. She shoves the man with unexpected strength, sending him flying across the room. Realizing she's revealed more of her secrets than she intended, Seraphine panics and runs out of the cafe, but Andy follows her, unable to hide how impressed he is by her legs. The two almost kiss, but she changes her mind, telling him to stop looking for her and insisting it's for his own good. Andy feels heartbroken, but his friends tell him it's just a game to make him more attached to her. He's not entirely convinced and remains worried about her mental state, especially after Seraphine reveals she's an orphan and blames herself for her parents' death. Later, the three decide to visit her house again, but this time a man named Claude answers the door, telling them Seraphine isn't home. He claims he loves Americans and invites them in. Andy declines the invitation, asking about Claude's relationship with the woman. He simply responds that he takes care of her and even gives them a flyer for a party at a club called The Moon, saying Seraphine will be there. Andy can't resist the temptation and drags his friends to the nightclub. A bit later, the club's bouncer, who seems to let anyone in, stops them when he notices they're Americans, only allowing them entry when Andy says they're invited by Claude. Inside, the atmosphere is very strange, with almost no women present, and of course no Seraphine. Chris volunteers to check her house again, leaving Andy and Brad to wait at the club. No one answers when he knocks, but a light coming from another part of the house catches his attention. Chris decides to investigate, and to his shock, he finds Seraphine locked in a cage. He immediately breaks the window to enter the basement and rescue her. Even while imprisoned, she keeps telling him she doesn't need help and tries to chase Chris away until he mentions Andy is at the party. When she sees the flyer Claude gave them, Seraphine changes her mind and asks Chris to get her the cage key hanging on the wall. She says Andy is in great danger, but Chris refuses to obey her when she tells him to stay out of it. Seraphine knocks him out with a blow to the head to prevent his interference. Minutes later, he wakes up to find himself locked in the cage, the key back on the wall, completely out of reach. The basement is empty, but from a curtained-off area, when Seraphine arrives at the club, the bouncer seems a bit afraid of her, letting her in immediately. Even without Claude's permission, some faces grab Andy and warn him that they must leave immediately. A man named Jack tries to block the path of the two. Seraphine says Andy belongs to her and takes the boy through a passageway resembling a tunnel. Claude scolds Jack for the mistake and then follows the two, unaware that Brad is right behind him. In the cage, Chris uses his wits and tries to turn his clothes into an improvised walker, managing to drop the key onto it with his shoe. As he begins to pull, Seraphine and Andy continue their escape from Claude until they reach a wall with a terrifying opening. Andy must enter it alone. As a farewell, he seizes the moment and kisses her, feeling her claws on his back, and she pushes him into the opening, shouting at him to disappear quickly. Andy still believes Claude is the biggest threat, hesitating to leave her alone, even when her voice starts to change. He only changes his mind when Seraphine loses her patience, throwing rocks at him. Meanwhile, on the dance floor, Claude's companions also seem to undergo a transformation, becoming more animalistic. But when the light of the full moon hits Seraphine's face, the truth is revealed. She and all her companions are werewolves after their transformation. She enters through the same opening, and Brad doesn't see her when he arrives shortly after, still searching for Andy. At the same time, the other werewolves spread terror in the crowded club, turning the victims into prey, just as the three Americans fell into the trap. The victims rush to the exit, but the security guard has already locked it from the outside. Even Chris, who has now freed himself, hears heartbreaking moans coming from the basement and goes to check if someone needs help. When he opens the curtain, he sees a terrifying legless werewolf lying on a stretcher, still trying to chase him. The creature is so strong that it manages to drag the stretcher and all the medical equipment with it as it advances toward Chris. The boy uses a spoon to pry open a door, finding himself in front of a cabinet. But now the monster is so close that Chris barely manages to leap over the overturned stretcher and escape through the window. Brad also encounters a horrifying situation in the tunnels, his curiosity piqued by two glowing dots. He doesn't realize it's a werewolf until it's too late. Brad doesn't survive the attack, and his body is carried away with the water flow. Andy, still in the tunnels, is terrified when he finds himself face to face with the beast. He runs in the opposite direction and reaches a gate just in time to close it. But the monster is so strong that it easily breaks through the gate. Andy can do nothing but buy some time by using a discarded iron rod as a weapon. Still, the monster quickly regains its strength, injuring Andy's leg as he escapes. The next morning, Andy wakes up in Seraphine's house with heightened senses. Chris is also there, hiding in the garden and peeking through the window as Seraphine blends what looks like human body parts in a blender. When he throws pebbles at the window, he catches Andy's attention and starts warning him. But Seraphine interrupts them when she enters the room with a drink. She explains to Andy that he was bitten by a werewolf, and as a result, he will also turn into one. He laughs, thinking it's all a joke, until he starts experiencing horrifying hallucinations. Seraphine explains that this is normal during the transformation. Things get worse when her mother appears and Andy discovers she is a corpse. Terrified, he escapes through the window, unaware of his newfound physical abilities. He also doesn't hear his friend calling out to him. Claude captures Chris, and Andy returns to the club, which is now filled with police and scattered body parts of all the victims. He is horrified when he recognizes Brad as they pull his body from the river. At that moment, he meets Inspector Luke. At the police station, Andy discovers that all the bodies are missing their hearts, but no one believes his testimony except for this mystery. Andy must deal with the changes happening to his body and his growing appetite, which includes a hunger for female companionship. This instinct awakens when he meets Amy Finch, another American tourist who agrees to have dinner with him. She is puzzled by his behavior at the table. Andy remains in denial, even when Brad's ghost surprises him. His reaction causes great embarrassment. Unaware that a detective is tailing him, Andy runs to the bathroom to talk to the deceased Brad. Brad reiterates Seraphine's explanations, adding that he himself has become a zombie, doomed to wander the earth until the werewolf who killed him is also dead. For now, Brad insists that Andy leave the girl and lock himself away before the moon rises. Andy stubbornly ignores all this, taking Amy for a walk in the cemetery where things heat up between them. The detective continues to follow them, sneaking behind gravestones with his small dog. But Andy is startled when he begins to feel the effects of the moon, leaving the girl on top of a tomb and jumping into a fountain to cool his body. Annoyed, she starts looking for him. At that moment, Andy emerges from the water in werewolf form, ready to attack her. Amy runs through the cemetery, trying to fend him off with perfume and hiding in a locked mausoleum. But she mistakes the shadows of the small dog for him. Eventually, she leaves her hiding spot at the worst possible moment, and Andy attacks her, devouring the detective as well. Even the small dog doesn't survive. When Andy regains consciousness amidst the chaos and flashing cameras of reporters, Inspector Luke arrests him, revealing that he hired the detective to follow him. He shows Andy the victims from the previous night and their gruesome state. When Andy is left alone in the morgue, Amy opens her eyes and begins cursing him. Shortly after, Brad appears, and the two argue. Meanwhile, the agent mocks Luke's crazy theories, ordering the American's immediate arrest, but Andy has already escaped. When the inspector returns, he is with Brad and Amy on the street, finally convinced that everything is real. Brad says the only way for Andy to become human again is to eat the heart of the werewolf who turned him. Andy suspects it's likely Seraphine. At that moment, Claude's gang suddenly appears, dragging Andy to an old church. As they descend into the crypts, Claude explains that his pack consists of carefully selected werewolves, meant to be a superior breed. Andy's transformation was an accident, but he can still join this powerful group if he proves himself worthy. They take him to the cell where Chris is imprisoned, demanding that he rip out his friend's heart. When Andy refuses, Claude warns him that this will cost him his own heart. But Andy remains steadfast in his decision. Suddenly, he attacks Claude, relying on his newfound reflexes to escape. But since the others are also werewolves, Andy quickly finds himself surrounded. Just then, Seraphine's voice calls his name, breaking down the door behind him. The two escape together. Seraphine pours gasoline along the way, and when they reach a secret passage, she throws a flame on the ground, setting the entire tunnel on fire before the water extinguishes it with Andy. The path leads directly to her basement. There, Seraphine shows who is sleeping behind the curtain. His name is Thierry. He is a scientist, and also he is her stepfather. Not long ago, he was on the verge of discovering a cure for the family's condition, but the first test went wrong, and she turned into a werewolf. Seraphine attacked her mother and then went after Thierry, who couldn't escape through the sewers. When she woke up, she felt so guilty that she climbed to the top of the tower to throw herself off. That's how she met Andy. It doesn't take long for the werewolf gang to arrive to check if the escapees are there. Andy escapes to the upper floor, and Seraphine tries to hold off Claude, but the others quickly chase after her. What makes things worse is that Amy shows up again, still very upset, and tries to help the werewolves in the chase, pointing to where Andy is hiding. Luckily, she doesn't even know how to whistle, and she falls down, and the gang doesn't see Andy until he manages to steal a car. However, he causes a scene, and all the cars crash into each other like dominoes, angering several drivers. Now being chased by two different groups, Andy clings to the back of a bus to return to the basement. There, he finds Seraphine devastated, trying in vain to revive her stepfather after the gang destroyed the lab. What makes matters worse is that they also stole the substance that causes instant transformation and left behind only a flyer for the upcoming party. Andy, knowing it's another trap, sneaks in among the guests, turns off the music, and warns everyone that they're in danger. But Luke is also at the party, and Andy is captured again amidst the applause of the audience, who don't believe any warnings. Seraphine is outside and sees that the bodyguard has blocked the exit. The police discover they are trapped inside just as Macaubre's show begins. Claude and his gang step onto the stage dressed as monks and reveal a crucified Chris. Faced with this scene, Andy grabs an officer's gun and shoots at the gang, but he is quickly subdued, and Luke orders everyone's arrest. Meanwhile, the fake monks inject themselves with the substance. Even handcuffs aren't enough to contain the beasts when they finally reveal themselves and start attacking everyone indiscriminately. The crucifix eventually collapses, and Chris falls amidst the chaos. At the same time, Seraphine frees herself from the bodyguard and breaks down the door with a bulldozer. Responding to a reinforcement call, several patrol cars arrive simultaneously, along with the agent herself. The scene is surreal because the location is an abandoned church, and Chris appears still tied to the crucifix, running for his life as much as he can. The agent gets annoyed by the police's superstitions and orders everyone to enter immediately. Andy grabs another gun and shoots one of the werewolves, warning Seraphine that Claude has succeeded, praying that several others are taken out, including Brad's killer, who is finally freed from the physical trap. As he runs from the police, Andy and Seraphine descend into the catacombs, taking different paths. Luke bumps into a werewolf and runs in fear, falling through a secret passage. The agent isn't as lucky and is eaten along with her assistant. Their screams alert Seraphine, who goes to take down one of the werewolves but discovers she's out of ammo at the worst possible moment. With no chance of defeating him in her human form, she runs quickly and encounters a fallen monk still holding a syringe. Seraphine decides to use it, transforming herself as well, and confronts her fellow werewolf now on equal footing. But Andy doesn't know this when he arrives armed and shoots both of them. The other dies instantly, but Seraphine reverts to her human form. Andy panics when he realizes what he's done, and she tells him there are no more chances, asking him at least to ease her pain. She believes she'll be free if he eats her heart. The police arrive at that moment, and Andy leaves them to deal with her, as now only Claude remains for the gang to be defeated. While searching for the antidote, he slips and falls onto the subway tracks just as a train appears from the curve. Seeing Claude coming toward him, Andy jumps just before they reach him, and the train hits the werewolf. The passengers are startled by the impact, and the driver goes to check the tracks through the glass but is immediately attacked. The beast breaks into the next car, and everyone panics when they see it, but the drug's effect wears off quickly. Claude wakes up in his human form and begins preparing another syringe when Andy enters through the window, knocking the syringe away. The two fight, and Andy sees the mark he left on Claude's shoulder the night he was bitten, realizing that Seraphine wasn't the one who bit him. As he tries to retrieve the syringe, Claude eventually stabs Andy and tries to flee, realizing his mistake, but he can't escape. Andy transforms, slams him to the ground, and devours his heart from behind. Months later, Andy and Seraphine are about to get married when Chris drops the ring. The two jump to catch it, and we see them at the Statue of Liberty, where Andy places the ring on Seraphine's finger while they're still in the air. And that's the end of the movie. See you in the next